Welcome to Colonial Williamsburg. I'm Dorothy Ballard Jenkins Ross. We're standing here in front of the College of William and Mary, which is a good place for any descendants of the Bucktrouts and Braithwaites to start a tour, because the college was established here on land, the plantation of our first Virginia ancestor, Thomas Ballard I. The college was established in 1693, long before the capital, the royal capital, moved to this tiny settlement from Jamestown. This was a tiny settlement called Middle Plantation.
We're now standing a little bit farther down Duke of Gloucester Street, looking at some of the pretty colonial homes. Down the street we've walked through Merchant Square, and down at the far end of Duke of Gloucester Street you can see the College of William and Mary, the Wren building, way at the far west end of the street. Duke of Gloucester goes directly west-east. And Aunt Dorothy's going to tell us a little bit about this little colonial sign.
This sign of the sheep is a colonial way of saying this is a tailor shop. In the colonial days, there were a great many people that did not know how to read. Curtis Maupin Gardens, which are across from Bruton Church. This is an old-style English-type garden, and we see here argyrodum plants blooming in between the little boxwood hedges. And the paths are oyster shell paths, which were the prominent paths of Williamsburg for generations. All the paths and even the streets were paved with oyster shells. The boxwood hedges are used because the garden will always look neat without even flowers, when the flowers aren't blooming.
And we're directly across the street from the Bruton Parish Church. Would you like to talk a little bit about Bruton Parish and the role that it's played in our family life?
Well, Bruton Church was here even before the college, and Thomas Ballard, our ancestor who owned the college land, was the first vestryman here. And I think you can see the Bucktrout headstone, one of the Bucktrout headstones to the right of the front door. We will go over closer soon. Many, many, many generations of Bucktrouts and Braithwaites have been baptized here and married here.
And buried here.
And buried here.
It was considered quite an honor to be buried in the churchyard. Parish Church. Services on Sunday and special days. One of the oldest Episcopal churches in America.
These are the Bucktrout graves at Bruton Church. The Richard Manning Bucktrout graves and the Benjamin Earnshaw Bucktrout graves. Those are the sons of Benjamin Bucktrout. There are also some Smith graves here who were family members. And behind the graves is an interesting pattern of what they call checkerboard brickwork, which is an old English style done with glazed headers, or the dark burnt bricks. Dedicated to our Thomas Ballard I, whom I told you lived on Rich Neck Plantation, where the college now is, and was the first vestryman here. They put up a plaque to honor him.
Okay, and up here on the wall we have another plaque. Walk through the pew. See if we can read this. To the glory of God and in memory of the vestry of 1674, who erected the first brick church upon this foundation. And we see the name of Honorable Thomas Ballard. Looking up toward the front of the church and the altar, the organ. Lovely colors, sort of a seafoam green and a cranberry accent. the baptismal font here that all of the Bucktrouts and Braithwaites were baptized in. Family legend says was the same font that Pocahontas was baptized in. The guide of the Bruton Parish Church has very nicely allowed us to come forward and get a closer look at the baptismal font, which we have never seen up close. And she's going to allow us to walk up and take a closer look at it. Very handsome view of Bruton Parish Church here. They're doing some work on the steeple, the lovely red tree, and the catalpa trees that have been traditionally around the palace green for years and years and years. And now we're looking right down at the governor's palace and around. Good day, Reverend. And how are you today, sir?
Tolerably well. Salubrious weather today.
Yes, it's lovely weather. You probably don't remember me from last year, but I was out here visiting your lovely city, and we had an interesting conversation about your church, Bruton Parish Church.
Oh, yes, Mom.
And
Must have been shortly after my arrival.
it probably was. It was at exactly this time last year. And I had introduced myself to you as Mistress Sylvia Jenkins Lehman, and I talked to you about my kinsman, Honorable Thomas Ballard, who was one of your first vestrymen.
Oh my goodness.
And so you are going about your daily business today, which is what,
Well,
if I may be so bold?
I have an errand to the Public Records Office. A young lad in the parish. He is a ward of the parish, actually. And it's time that he is apprenticed, that he might be a useful member of the society. So I need to speak to the keeper of the public records on some administrative matters with the case. If your relative is vestryman, certainly you know about the matters.
Yes. Well, how do you spend your day here in the town? Do you largely go about on church business?
Well, no. I am only assuming the rectorship of Bruton as long as the Reverend Mr. Horrocks is out of the colony. He left for reasons of his health.
Oh.
My principal duties lie in teaching at Williamsburg College.
Oh, I see.
I lecture on Mondays and Thursdays, and in between I conduct seminar or give individual attention to my students. However, I happen to have a space of liberty now, so I thought it would be an opportune moment to transact some church business.
I see. Do you go about and spend time with your parishioners then?
Oh, yes,
in
indeed.
times of crisis or need?
Oh, well, certainly, especially in view of the loss of our governor, Lord Bucktrouts, just recently.
Oh.
It is a burden indeed to condole with everyone who knew him, for all knew and esteemed him so very highly.
Now, I was out of the colony, and I wasn't aware that we had lost our governor, Lord Bucktrouts. How did that happen?
Well, I'm afraid he got sick and died, Mom. He was a gentleman of some 53 years, and I'm afraid the seasoning process did not go well with him.
Oh,
He had only been here 2 years, and I'm told that that is a period after which one might expect an easier transition.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Lord Bucktrouts did not make it.
Oh, that's very unfortunate.
He was indeed a very skillful diplomat. I think we shall sorely feel his loss.
Well, what else would be interesting to hear from you? I'm thinking, do you have a family?
No, Mom. We professors at the college have been forbidden marriage as long as we occupy our seats because, well, I don't think I would be breaking any confidence if I told you. The Reverends Messrs. Cam and Johnson did become married and vacated their lodgings at the college, thus rendering them unable to oversee their charges properly.
Oh.
In the proper moral behaviors. So a statute was drafted to that effect to prevent the like from happening in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So I live with my students, and they are a handful.
What kind of activities do the students get into?
Well, there are 3 disciplines under the moral philosophy, which is what I teach. Rhetoric, ethics, and logic. As I say, there are a number of academic disciplines represented at William and Mary. The lecture, the seminar, and the tutorial. So there is much to be done by the diligent student. In fact, between my colleague Thomas Gwatka and I, there's a lecture on every day of the week, excepting only the Sabbath.
You are indeed a busy man.
Oh yes, I only deliver 2, Thomas 4. So,
Well, do you have any time for any social diversions here in the city?
the Sabbath, yes, and of course during public times there are subscription balls and private entertainments at homes, surrounding plantations and in townhouses. In fact, at Christmastide there is a great deal of merrymaking at the college. I hope to be elected Lord of Misrule this year.
Oh.
That I might
And what will your
guide
duties
the
entail?
rebels. Oh, well, deciding which sorts of games should be played and generally being certain that everything is carried off well. Daily, though, I'm afraid there's not much time, since the boys and scholars are not blessed and put to bed until 9. It does not leave much time, since one needs to arise for chapel at 5.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Well, it's been lovely visiting with you.
Not at
May
all.
I take a fuller sketch of you
I
so
didn't
that I can
realize you were sketching them.
so that I can admire your priestly garb?
Yes.
Good day, sir. We're on the south side of Duke of Gloucester, looking toward the Norton Cole House, and that is where our friend William Cole, the education specialist for Colonial Williamsburg, has his office in the back. And now we're starting to look around Market Square. And this is where the fife and drum comes and the militia, and they do some of their exercises. I see the carriage going along the street behind the square. And in the middle of the square is the public courthouse, where you can now buy tickets to different events for Colonial Williamsburg. Looking east, down Duke of Gloucester now toward the Capitol, and coming into the front of the Powderhorn, as they say, but it's often called the Powder Magazine. Aunt Virginia Braithwaite Howard at one time had a little store in the Powderhorn and sold brass door knockers. And over under the tree we have the oxen cart, which gives rides to children. See someone waiting for some customers under a tree. It's lovely weather today. Kind of overcast, but just beautiful. Down in a little ravine. I'm just making a 360-degree turn. The charming little brick house. And right next door to it is the Greenhow Repeton House. Aunt Dorothy, would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Well, in 1815, a dashing Frenchman lived in the Repeton house named Hippolyte Repeton, and he wrote a flowery letter to Mary Bruce Bucktrout, who was a widow then, asking for the lily white hand of her beautiful daughter Rachel. And he won the hand of the beautiful daughter, we understand, and carried her off to Texas, and we haven't heard a thing from them since.
So we have some Bucktrout relatives in Texas. And now you can look again toward Bruton Parish Church across Palace Green. I hear some clip-clopping coming down the street, and we have a lady on a cart going by, doing her daily duties as a colonial woman. A view of the courthouse of 1770 in the middle of Market Square. Taking a look, I'm actually on the lawn where I'm not supposed to be, but because I have a camera and a special pass, I just might get away with it. Inside, looking through the interesting fence and the Market Square Tavern, and looking directly across to the famous Tuning's Tavern on the corner of the square, where we are going to be eating dinner tonight. That will be a special treat. Looking across the square, we see the very, very well-known Peyton Randolph home. Now we're directly inside the Powderhorn, and we see some very interesting brickwork again. Fascinating to see how the bricks were laid out in colonial Williamsburg.
I haven't been in here in years.
Aunt Dorothy's leading the way. See what we can see. Barrels. Oh, going up some stairs.
A lot of people coming down. You gotta wait. There's quite a few coming down.
Yeah, we're ready to go up the stairs.
Four-barrel weapon, very light, very handy, wide bore shoots out a wide spray shot. We have what we call today a wide killing field. In other words, if you're in a close and confined situation, you have a bunch of people coming down on you, you point the weapon, you pull the trigger, it's got that shot, you're going to hit a lot of people with those guns.
Some pistols.
What would have been stored in these boxes? More muskets. We know from the inventories in this building that some muskets were stored in racks like this that you see on the walls. We also other
Different
muskets were stored in
accoutrements.
boxes like I'm sitting on. You're sitting on. Stacked.
On the south side of the street, with the sun at our back, and we're looking at the printing office and the post office, and that has quite a family history, so we'll be coming back later with one of the cousins to talk further about that. And I couldn't resist showing you the ham shop, which is now called Hunter's Store. But when I made my first trip to colonial Williamsburg with my mother and father and Holly Jenkins, we stayed upstairs in the ham shop, as I recall. We're standing in front of the site of the print shop, and out in front is our cousin, who's going to be chatting with us about the significance of this as a family landmark.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, Alex. How are you?
My name is James Alexander Ballard Howard. My mother and father couldn't get together, so they each got their way.
Oh, I see. Wonderful.
And you're looking now at the building that was owned by my grandmother, my mother's mother, and it was called the Braithwaite Building. It was a store 4 stories high with a fake front on the top to make it look like it was 5 stories. And in the left side of it, as you look at it, there was a funeral shop where they sold coffins. And next to that was a novelty store that was owned by a Jewish man that came to town and was selling all kinds of trinkets and dry goods and things. And then on the right side was a Chinese laundry. And we lived in this when we came back from Puerto Rico about 1918, just after the war. As a matter of fact, on the way over, my mother and I were on the deck of this freighter, because that was the only boat we could get back here. And we spotted a German submarine that came up alongside and cruised with us for about a half an hour.
Oh, for heaven's
sake.
sake.
Then they went away, and I think they didn't want to waste a shell on such an old rust bucket. But my mother was in not too good shape, because her mother had died, and she and my mother were very close, and she got the word that the death had occurred about 2 months afterwards because of the communication problem. There was no wireless or radio at that time. And she was heartbroken because she had helped run things here when she was in the States here. And she came here, and she couldn't even go to the burial because, of course, it was months later.
Uh-huh.
And so we were in the building here at that time during the flu epidemic, and we had a rough time. At any rate, we'd been here about 2 years, and my mother had purchased the Weatherbourne's Tavern up the road here,
Uh-huh.
and we were just started to move in there when the building burned down. And,
Uh-huh.
it's one of the biggest fires in Williamsburg. The whole building, which was almost a half a block long, burned down. There wasn't anything left of it at all.
Uh-huh.
But we had lived in there a short time, and the basement, I remember after the fire, my brother and I were digging around in what was left in the left-hand side of the building as you face it. We found some old lead that was all melted, and actually what it was type from the original printing press.
Uh-huh.
And also in the basement was an old car without a top on it, just the wheels and the chassis and the steering wheel.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And it said something like Dusen on it, and we called it our doozy, and we'd roll it around the basement. Actually, it was a Duesenberg,
Oh.
and
Mhm.
we had a lot of fun with that.
Yes. Well, your mother was a very well-known, prominent member of our family, Virginia Braithwaite Howitt, and I'm sure you have many stories to tell. Right now, why don't we go into the print shop?
All right, let me just tell you what this place was known as.
Okay.
In the back of it, there was a stream that ran under the building and wandered back to the street in the back here. And there was not much water in it, but there was water in it, and it was called a ravine. And of course, the descendants that lived here were all descendants of England, and they had a certain charm about wanting to give a classy name to a place. So instead of calling it Mrs. Howitt's Ravine or Virginia's Ravine, she was known as Jenny, so they called it Jenny's Bottom.
Uh-huh.
And everybody got a big kick out of that.
I guess it's still known as that amongst the
It's still
family
known-
members.
That's right.
And in Williamsburg in general, too.
Still is known as Jenny's Bottom.
That's wonderful. Well, shall we go into the print shop?
Yes, let's look
Okay,
at it.
let's do that. Well, we have in front of us 3 members of our family. James Alexander Howitt and his wife Penny, and Dorothy Ballard Jenkins Ross. So we're preparing now to go into the print shop. Here we are. You certainly look like you're all members of the same family.
Yes, we do.
So let's go in.
Anybody wants to write, he'll have my address, so y'all can write to me and everything.
Fine. Okay, then I'll do that. Thank you.
These folks are okay, they own this place.
We're standing now down behind the print shop, looking down into the spring that originates here at this site and goes through Aunt Jenny's Bottom. So, Alex, why don't you come forward and we'll chat some more about the family.
All right, this is a spring that when we were children we used to play in. It originates under the building where the old car was that I was describing. And it flowed out to the outside, and I remember that there were a lot of stinging nettle plants in the stream. We used to be careful of those because if it gets stung once in a while it was pretty vicious.
Uh-huh.
And then on the other side of the yard there's a well which was owned by the people in the small house. We might take a shot of that later.
Okay.
But they would let us use the well to keep our milk and butter in because there was no refrigeration or ice in those days.
Uh-huh.
So we'd go over there with our tin bucket of milk and a little container of butter and lower it down on the string in the well into the water. And then we'd pick it up when we wanted to use it and bring it back to the house.
So this was a playground of yours and
It sure was.
a favorite area. What did you do for recreation as a boy?
Well, we got in a lot of mischief.
Oh, I'll bet you did. What kind of mischief?
Well, for instance, next door there was a garage owned by the Owenses. They're still in Williamsburg. We have some of their descendants.
Uh-huh.
And one of the fellows there invited us over one weekend. So we went over there on a Saturday. And no one was there, and we played around in the cars, and we found ourselves taking the cars apart, and we learned how to take the wheels off and get the ball bearings out of them.
Oh,
and we brought
I see.
those back the next Monday when Mr. Owens came into his shop. He was very upset,
Oh, dear.
and he looked around and talked to his children, and one of them admitted that we'd been over there and I got help with that.
I'll bet you did.
I've had a daughter out there.
Let's go in and see what kind of music they're doing.
Now Nancy and Everett are moving up there.
Yeah, the same as yours.
Thank you. Because they wanted the forge to look weathered, and here it is, a brand new building, and indeed it does look weathered. A lady working in the forge.
Pretty near done. What had happened is this back bearer had basically deteriorated in the fire over a few seasons of being used. They were almost pure iron, which means that they weren't cast iron items. Cast iron is actually iron that fit through the front of the andiron and was riveted over. So he's just bending up the back bearer. See that little stub sticking out there? That'll just be hammered over. Right attached to those two.
Cow's Tavern, where Aunt Dorothy and Uncle Ronnie were lodged last year, up in the tip-top room, looking down toward Weatherburn Tavern. Getting closer to the Capitol. And we'll be telling you more about Weatherburn Tavern later. Get to go in and go shopping at Tarpley and Company.
A guy that was from California.
Look in the shop window and see their goods. It smells wonderful in here. Wig curlers, needles, needle case, shears and scissors. Something for every lady. Familiar Weatherburn Tavern sign. Used to be the sign of the Bull's Head when Aunt Virginia Braithwaite Howitt was the hostess. And across the street, many attractive shops and buildings. The jeweler at the sign of the Golden Ball, and the millinery shop. With a pretty little greenhouse right across the street from the tavern. On the corner. We are at the Barber and Peruke, or Wig Maker, and the King's Arms Tavern, where we had a lovely tavern dinner with all the cousins last year in the evening, getting closer to the Capitol. And on the north side of the street, the Raleigh Tavern.
The King's Arms is where the Richard Bucktrout house was, where Grandmother Braithwaite was born. She was Adelia Bucktrout. And Bucktrout entertained Civil War soldiers during the Civil War. he was too old to be in the war at that time.
His arms for the crowd outside waiting for lunch. Well, look who we have here standing under the Weatherburn Tavern sign. I'd like to introduce our cousin Bruce Cleveland Rodamore, who shall be from now on referred to as Bruce Cleveland, and of course Aunt Dorothy, and we're going to chat for a minute about Weatherburn Tavern. Aunt Dorothy, would you like to start out by explaining the historical significance to our family of the tavern?
Well, this is an early, real colonial building, goes back to colonial days, called the Richard Bland House. And it was one of Aunt Virginia's first restorations of Williamsburg. She was active with the Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities and put a sign on her lot at the printing shop that it was the site of the printing shop, and then she helped the association buy the powder horn, and after that she wanted to do something bigger, so she bought this old colonial building and restored it as best she could, and called it the Richard Bland and opened it as a tavern.
Okay, Bruce, do you have anything to add to that before we go in to see Weatherburn Tavern?
Well, she also had a gift shop too, and she served dinners here. In fact, what you'd have to do is come in the early afternoon and place your order, and later on that evening you'd have dinner.
Okay. Well, I think we're about ready to go in and visit the tavern. Thank you.
Go.
It might be interesting to point out at this time the red undercoat of paint, which is under the white overcoat of paint. And while it might give it kind of a tacky appearance on the outside, the whole point of the red undercoat was because in colonial days it's been documented that the building had a red undercoat and gave the building a, quote, rosy glow, unquote. So while it might look like Colonial Williamsburg was not keeping up the paint on the building, it's really specifically done to achieve that effect. The back side of Weatherburn Tavern, quite a large building. This is the dairy behind Weatherburn Tavern, where various milk products were kept to keep them cool. Looking down, I notice very, very well-worn steps, been trod on by numerous feet. And here we have the smokehouse behind Weatherburn Tavern, where up on the ceiling we have hanging hams, just as they were hanging during the smoking process. Down here, stacks of wood and the fire pit. Porch of the tavern looking at the dependency buildings. The reason they were called dependencies were because the tavern was highly dependent upon them for different services. We're walking into the garden area now behind the dependencies, just as if we were coming out to pick a basket full of produce for tonight's dinner. They're actually gardening back here. Looking behind the kitchen building over into the shaded area, and we have animal pens and the necessary in the back corner, and we're looking out the back of the lot across Francis Street toward the corner of the Chiswell Bucktrout home in the far distance, and Bucktrout Lane, which leads down to Providence Hall. Good, Bruce. Thanks for providing the sound effect. We have Cousin Bruce here in the backyard of Weatherburn Tavern, and he's going to share a few experiences about his family life here.
Okay, let me explain to you first why we called our mother Butch. Briefly, we were three brothers, three little children, and we would frequently get into trouble. And instead of calling her Mommy, she told us that we would have to start calling her Butch.
Now we are referring to Virginia Bruce Howitt Rodamore, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, go ahead.
And so when we were members of this beach club in New Jersey, where we would often get into trouble, she would, if the owner would come, or whoever's property we would be messing up or whatever would come after us, and we would be calling her Butch, she would say, well, I don't know these kids. I just happened to be here. And then, so that's how the Butch story started. Now, as far as these chickens are concerned, as I had mentioned before, Grandma used to have dinners. And
now your grandma would be Virginia Bruce Braithwaite Howitt.
That's correct. That's correct. And during one summer, my mother, Butch, Virginia B. Howitt, ran the kitchen. And it was during a Sunday afternoon. And these people came in and ordered Southern Fried Chicken dinner. And they had left and went about their way, and my mother looked in the refrigerator and noticed that there weren't any chickens in the refrigerator. But lo and behold, there were a whole batch of live chickens in the bag. So she didn't know what to do, and of course the prospect of having to slaughter the chickens didn't excite her very much. And she went into the tool shed and saw this rusty looking axe, and she said, no, I don't think I can chop their heads off with this axe. So she hunted around a little bit more and found a shotgun. So she loaded up the old shotgun, whooshed the chickens into the corner, pointed the shotgun towards the chickens, closed her eyes, and pulled the trigger. Well, you can imagine maybe about 6 or 7 chickens went at various places, and there were about 2 or 3 dead chickens.
Were you a witness to this, Bruce?
No, this was long before my time. This was even before she got married.
Oh.
This is a long time ago. So she plucked the dead chickens off of the ground.
This must have taken quite a long time while they were waiting for their dinner.
Well, I want you to understand that people ordered their dinner beforehand. They would come in the early afternoon.
Oh, I see.
And then go about their way and then come back in the evening.
So she had some time.
So she had some time, and also she was committed to those chicken dinners, because by the time she looked in the refrigerator and didn't see any poultry in there, they had already gone and had ordered, were expecting to have chicken dinners.
Right.
So she plucked the feathers out, and my mother was a very good cook. And she served up these dinners, and at the end of the meal she noticed that there was a little on the side of the plate, just a little mound of these little BBs, which of course were from the shotgun. and the guests kept on biting into these little BBs, and they complimented my mother with the chicken, and they said, boy, this is excellent chicken. Where did you get this? We noticed that there's a whole batch of BBs in them, and she gave them some cock and bull story as to these were wild chickens that were shot somewhere in the area. So
That's a great story. Thank you, Bruce. We're standing at the back of the garden area and looking out over the rather large animal pen that reaches all the way back to Francis Street. And we see a few sheep and an odd fowl here and there. And at this time, Cousin Bruce is going to describe to us a bit about what the outbuildings were like back here before Colonial Williamsburg restored them. What are your remembrances, Bruce, about how it looked before Colonial Williamsburg shaped it all up to Revolutionary time?
Well, first of all, let me just step in front of the camera.
Okay.
First of all, these buildings were not in existence. Essentially what you were looking at was pretty much of an open yard with a lot of vegetation around, specifically wisteria. We had some large trees here, of which they saved some, but not too many. I remember more trees here. And there was a long series of connected buildings on this side right here. And where...
Could you face the camera a little bit more, Bruce?
Yes. Well, where there's the smokehouse right here, there was what we call the smokehouse apartment.
Oh.
And there were several rental apartments in this section, as well as garages. And there were, in this area right back here, there were several storage sheds, as well as the area right here where the chickens were, right here. Now, this grazing area where the sheep are was a parking lot.
A parking lot?
That's correct.
Uh-huh.
And I believe was owned by is owned by Colonial Williamsburg. So it was very different. My memories of this area are very different than how they appear now.
How about the smokehouse, the dairy, and the kitchen? Were they all in place there?
No, they weren't. No, they weren't.
Nothing was there as it stands now?
Nothing was there. Nothing was there.
And this was rebuilt then to make it colonial?
That's correct.
Authentic?
That's correct. In fact, it was at first quite a shock coming back and seeing all this here, because that's not how I remembered it as being.
Well, what about the tavern building itself? What are your memories about how it looked inside? And where did you stay? Which rooms did you stay when you came to the tavern?
Well, we stayed in one of the apartments here.
Uh-huh.
One of the smokehouse apartments. And also there was another building, let's say 180 degrees back of you, that was also converted into a living space, as I remember. But no, we stayed in one of these apartments. The Weatherburn Tavern was a previous name, actually a more historical name as far as the 18th century is concerned. We remember it as being the Bull's Head, or at the sign of the Bull's Head.
Yes.
As far as the division of rooms and so on, we did have the great room, which was a gift shop. And we didn't have as many small little nooks and crannies on the lower floor as you see them right now. And the gift shop extended into that lower floor. The rear room where we were at, where the I believe they identified it as the Weatherburn family space.
Yes.
That was Grandma's room.
Oh.
That's where she slept.
The first Virginia Bruce, the founder of the Bucktrout and Braithwaite Foundation.
That's correct. As far as the first room that we came into, which they call it the Bull's Room, or
the Bull's Head Room.
The Bull's Head Room was a sleeping area, and the upper rooms were also sleeping areas. And Aunt Ruth slept in the farthermost room, actually the last sleeping area that we were in on this sequence.
Yes.
Okay, that was Aunt Ruth's room.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also a kitchen downstairs. Also, there were 2 stairways. Let's see, were they? No, actually there was 1 stairway, and they relocated the stairway.
I have a vague remembrance of a small children's stairway. Do you remember that? It was almost like a toy stairway. It went upstairs.
That's correct. There were actually 2 sets of stairways that went upstairs.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've seen a postcard that Aunt Dorothy has with the children's stairway and toys scattered on it.
right.
And then when my husband and I came on our trip after we were first married in 1974, they had already removed the stairway because it was post-colonial.
That's correct. That's correct. Let me just say that one of the things that the restoration did change here was establishing 2 front porches. Before there was just 1 front porch. Now, to get into some interesting family restoration history, I just want to introduce, I'll tell you a little bit about the friction that was between Grandma and the restoration. In the early 30s, when the restoration was buying up a lot of these buildings, they very much wanted to buy my grandmother's properties, and she refused to sell.
Mm-hmm.
And she is maybe one of the few private businesses on this block or on this street, which is Duke of Gloucester. And there was a good bit of friction between my grandmother and CW. And of course this passed on to generation, and the friction continued between my mother and CW.
Mm-hmm.
And it, I guess, best exemplified in the situation where we came down here for the summer with the intention of renting rooms to tourists. And the Chamber of Commerce came in and just gave us a fine-tooth comb inspection. I mean, the person who was here to inspect was like down on his hands and knees to find various faults. And there were really minor faults.
There's the noon cannon.
And essentially, they did not pass us as a suitable residence. Of course, we were outraged, and who was mostly outraged was my mother. So this was just one more aggravation that we had to go through as far as dealing with CW. And of course, the Chamber of Commerce was dictated by CW.
Mm-hmm.
So one morning, both my brother William and I woke up, and it looked like any type of morning. It was nice and sunny, and there Butch was painting these signs, and we didn't know what was going on. I mean, she always did some wild things, but there were signs condemning colonial Williamsburg. And before I knew it, she was having William build this effigy, this big dummy that we hung out right on the sign, which wasn't the Weatherburns Tavern. It was called, the sign was the Bull's Head. And we also had the sheet that had lettering on it, stating that CW was unfair to businesses. And
did you mention John D. Rockefeller Jr.'s name on the sheet or on the effigy?
I think maybe his name was on the effigy. I'm not quite sure. I think the effigy had a tricorn hat on it, and it had CW or something like that. But the message was abundantly clear as to what this demonstration was about. And what Butch did is that she coached us, and specifically my brother Bill, or as he was named Bill then, and it's now William, that it was all his doing. And when the press came, we had the press, we had reporters, we had phone calls. It was terribly embarrassing to CW, because here this is their show place, and right across their show place is they're being hung in effigy.
Uh-huh.
But she had it set up that the effigy and the signs and so on were of our doing, and that she couldn't control us.
Mm-hmm.
So she put all the blame on us, and of course made the message even more powerful, and also made the story, because essentially CW was robbing us of our summer income.
Uh-huh. We're now standing halfway across the street, looking toward Weatherburn's Tavern, which used to be called the Bull's Head, or the Richard Bland, by Aunt Virginia. Many of you will recognize the old Victorian Armistead home, where Cora and Dara used to stay, and they're both passed away now. But their nephew, the Judge Armistead that we showed at the beginning of the street, now owns the property and is leasing it to the APVA, which is the Association for the Protection, is it?
Preservation.
Preservation of Virginia Antiquities. And Aunt Dorothy's going to tell you something about the Armistead sisters.
This house, they were born in this house and came back here to retire. And Colonial Williamsburg for years and years and years wanted to get possession of this prized property right next to the Capitol. But like Aunt Virginia, they refused to sell out to what was called the Restoration. And but even then, the Restoration thought they would get it after they died, but it has been left to the association, and they've turned it into organizational offices, much to the sorrow and chagrin of Colonial Williamsburg.
And it has been decorated now by the famous Laura Ashley. Can you tell a little bit about some of the tales of when you used to stay here and the sisters would tell ghost stories and scare you to death, and some of their fight with Colonial Williamsburg?
When we came to Williamsburg, I always stayed with the Armistead sisters, who embarrassed Colonial Williamsburg by hanging a sign out over their front door of rooms for rent. And for $8, you could stay overnight in one of their big sleigh beds with a horsehair mattress. And but they kept the front door bolted all the time. You had to let them know when you were leaving so they could bolt it back, and then you had to knock on that big brass knocker to let you in when you came back for the evening. And they would capture you in the parlor very often to tell ghost stories. And they, continuing their fight for the Restoration, Dora used to have a gun that she said was used for shooting rats, but she laughed one day and said, "Someday I'll get me a Restoration man."
Dave and I were very fortunate in that after we were first married, when we came to Williamsburg in 1974, we were able to come up to the front porch, and Aunt Dorothy had written a very nice letter of introduction so that they were expecting us, and we were invited into the front parlor and had a nice chat, and were able to meet Kara and Dara, as they were called. And it is now listed on the map as Dara Armistead's home. Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities. The Dara Armistead House, circa 1890. And even though this is a a Victorian dwelling, it has been left in place to demonstrate life after colonial days.
This is the cabinet shop reconstructed by Colonial Williamsburg. That was one of the shops that Benjamin Bucktrout operated. He was a cabinet maker, and he also advertised that he made musical instruments. And eventually his business led, because a cabinet maker often had to make coffins, eventually his business moved into funeral service.
Okay,
The-
and Benjamin Bucktrout would be your great-great-great-grandfather.
That's right. It's interesting that the fact that the house was built over a stream, although the stream, they say, was always too small to operate any kind of a turning wheel. Benjamin Bucktrout was one of the most prominent and turned out to be one of the more prosperous cabinet makers of several that Williamsburg produced.
Okay, and they've recently acquired his chair that we saw yesterday over in the shop. So he is quite a prominent person here in Williamsburg. Why don't we walk along and look at the house from another, or the shop from another angle? On this end of the building we have the musical instrument maker, where you can go in and hear about that. And you can hear the stream bubbling underneath and looking down toward the cabinet side of the shop. A very attractive setting down in the woods.
This is the garden behind the print shop, which was called for years Aunt Jenny's Bottom, because she owned it so long after the death of her parents. As a stream runs through from a spring in this rear garden, it's the same stream that runs under the cabinet shop across the street. This was one of the first pieces of property Aunt Virginia had, and the print shop was the first piece of property leased to Colonial Williamsburg.
Okay, so following right under the street then, under Nicholson Street, we go and we see the cabinet shop where the stream continues on down through the gully. We're looking now right directly down onto the spring, going through Aunt Jenny's Bottom, as it's still known. A very beautiful little garden spot. Well, I'd like you to introduce yourself for our movie.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, my name is Matt Headley, and I'm the master of the shop at present. And we're here studying, exploring Williamsburg cabinet making, and of the several masters who ran this shop, your descendant Benjamin Bucktrout was a very important member. He is here at least in the early 1760s. He's being sent up to the store or to the printing office on some errands by Anthony Hay. He's apparently a trusted employee in 65 when he arrives. He apparently continues to work through this shop for a while as a journeyman. He has an opportunity, buys out the estate of a cabinet maker in town, John Ormston. Buys all of his tools, and apparently his space is available too. Bucktrout leaves this shop in 65, opens up an independent business, and is running a shop up by the Capitol. This is fairly short-lived. Anthony Hay, who he had worked for, and Hay establishes his business in the early 1750s. Hay retires and buys the Raleigh Tavern. And when he leaves, Benjamin Bucktrout comes back, rents this business from Hay, and gets a very good support from Hay in the Virginia Gazette. Hay is mentioning that Mr. Bucktrout will continue with all of his orders and would certainly provide the customers with the quality of work that they were used to getting. Bucktrout returns, runs the shop for about 3 years, and during that 3 years we have some very impressive things attributed to this shop. One possible piece is our desk and bookcase here.
Okay, could we take a look at that?
Sure. Where my information is here. The original is over in the Wallace Gallery on exhibit. It's part of Williamsburg's collection now. And this desk and bookcase is the one that we're copying. We have the bookcase section in the back here. This is Walt Timer's working on parts that will be the framework that the elaborate cornice is built around. So this piece and one other that is from the shop about the same time is also in the gallery. We have worked off of those two together to come up with the characteristics we have here. And the construction on this piece is very fine, very light, finely done dovetails. This is typical of high quality urban work. You get into rural areas and you might see dovetails half again this large. But these are very finely cut. Another interesting aspect, we've got a lot of unaccounted for space in this drawer. And the original, once the drawer is pulled out, there's a little finger catch here at the back, and there's a secret drawer, a secret compartment hidden on the interior. So this area is a good place to hide away valuables. These pigeonholes here, which are usually just decorative applications, little blocks glued in place, they are also the false fronts of the drawers here. So you have several secret compartments. This piece was apparently a custom ordered design, and one that these special little things were added to, at the request of the customer. They do have locks on all the drawers, on the desk lid, on the bookcases here. The cabinet maker was building furniture that he knew the customers were going to be storing the valuables in. They didn't have safety deposit boxes like we do today. So the furniture was very important for securing the valuable treasures that you might have. So in some of the nicer things, you'll often see these characteristics.
Hi there. How are you?
Hello.
I'm Dorothy. They come to see the
Nice to see y'all.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. Come on in.
Thank you. This is sort of like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Unfortunately, for current video processing, the chair is on its back right now.
My goodness.
Part of the needs for doing the carving. I don't know what it is that you want to see.
Well, we just wanted to kind of look at it, and we were hoping it would be in the museum, but since it isn't, we'll take a look at it now.
Okay.
Is it possible to remove the sheet so we can get a little bit of a look at it?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. This is the Benjamin Bucktrout chair, carved and constructed by my great-great-great-great-grandfather for the Masonics. Aunt Dorothy, would you like to tell a little bit about the chair?
I don't know any more than you do. How about your friend?
Not me.
Why don't you come over here a little closer?
Colonial Williamsburg has been trying to find a piece of signed Bucktrout furniture for years. And since they had his house and his cabinet shop restored, reconstructed, and they found this chair in a Masonic temple in North Carolina. Edenton, North Carolina, and managed to purchase it. And they are also making a reproduction of the Masons in that Masonic temple. And it will be shown in the Wallace Gallery as soon as they've made the copy.
Great. Is it difficult to move? You probably don't move it very often, do you?
We try not to.
I want to see that signature. I missed
Yes.
that before.
You know, on the back of that,
The signature is right
it's
actually
underneath
Yeah, it's
on the back.
it's very awkward, but you can see it actually.
Yes.
If you look up underneath there like that. Where's
It
the
was
flag?
fascinating to run your fingers along
none,
the
Jay. They're all
signature. Right back there, it's stamped Benjamin Bucktrout.
I'm sorry, I was pointing at the wrong place. It's right here.
Oh,
There it is.
yeah, I see that.
See it?
Oh, it's a stamped-in thing.
Yes, ma'am.
On the back.
Well, if he had a stamp, he should have stamped other things too. You know.
This is some of the magnificent carving that was done on the chair with the signs of the Masonics. Whoops. Move away a little bit. In the seat, you can see how aged the leather is, with a nice big hole right in the middle. Very beautiful carving on the arms. And there's the hammer. And and here is what it looks like underneath. We never did get to see that. And the carving on the legs, I remember, was really exceptional. Look at that detailed carving. Incredible.
Yes, ma'am. It is.
This is wonderful. I remember him talking about it last year.
This is the reproduction.
The reproduction is over here.
Okay, we'll take a look at that. Beautiful. Beautiful color. My husband will be interested to see how far you've come. Yes, it was the dolphin legs, that's right.
I think that the dolphin's coming probably right up.
This is the beautiful carving. This is the reproduction that Colonial Williamsburg is doing for the Masonics to replace Benjamin Bucktrout's original chair. See if we can come around and get a detailed look at that beautiful dolphin leg.
I'm not sure what the plans are for doing restoration with those legs. I know a lot of cases probably won't be done.
And apparently they're working under quite a deadline. They had promised that the chair would be done at the end of October 1986, which is rapidly approaching. So they are literally carving night and day to complete it and honor their promise.
Well, I think that the contrast between the two chairs is going to be more interesting.
What do we have here? Oh, for heaven's sakes. For the new chair.
In the process now of attaching everything together.
Oh, this is wonderful. And what kind of material is that?
It's all mahogany.
All mahogany.
And this has got gold. This is the Bibles painted, and the dividers themselves have got gold and silver leaf on them.
For heaven's sake. Is that the way it looked in the beginning?
Pretty close to it, yes.
As best as we can tell.
The original is broken at this point, and the tips are replaced. And so there's a little bit of evidence that they extended beyond. So we're using illustrations that we have of dividers from the late 18th century as a guide for restoring them all the way out.
And who did the printing on the page?
It's a woman named Terry Anderson who's done some work for the lab here.
Kings 1, chapter 7.
Which is a chapter that is significant to the Masons.
Very interesting. So you have personally been working on the chair for how long?
I've been working on the tools.
On the tools.
Yes, and a number of people around the foundation have been doing work on various parts of it. The fellows over at the Hay Cabinet Making Shop did the basic framing work on it. And Wallace Gussler's been doing the carving.
Is Mr. Gussler around today?
He's not over here. I think he's probably over at the gallery this afternoon.
I'm sorry we missed him. He gave us such a wonderful, informative talk last time. I had hoped to record him talking about the chair.
Well,
this is just fascinating.
On a pretty major project installing the Calk Abbey State bed at the gallery. That's why he's not here today.
So you're all very, very busy.
You're pretty much so, yes, ma'am.
Well, we certainly thank you for allowing us to come into your workshop again. Really appreciate it, and it will be a lot of fun for the cousins at home to see how you work.
Well, good.
Thank you.
You've seen the rest of these carved elements that
No, we haven't.
These are the two of the capitals that are that Wallace is in the process of carving. And
wonderful. And here we have what part down there?
Those are the arms of the chair.
They're
finished except for the upholstery work to be done on them.
So I wanted to take a good look at the book to compare it color-wise and wear-wise to the new copy. Just think of all the hundreds of thousands of people that have rubbed their backs up against that over the last 200 years.
You can see the outline on there of the star that will be applied to the center of the book that you looked at a minute ago.
Oh, I see. Okay.
There'll be a silvered star will be attached to the center there.
Mm-hmm.
Where the outline is now.
Okay.
And over
here?
Is the beginning of the bust of Matthew Pryor, which Wallace is in the process of carving.
Now this must
currently.
be a terribly big responsibility for all of you, and especially Wallace.
It's
How are
a big
you
responsibility for Wallace, and we're all.
How are you all holding up under this strain?
Doing pretty well.
I don't know where you would start on something like that.
I certainly don't either. I think Wallace has had a lot of experience in his experiences as the master gunsmith of carving, and then he got interested in sculpture, and he's done a number of clay modeled sculptures, and I think this may be his first three-dimensional wood carving.
Because the grain of the wood and everything, I guess.
Apparently, the kind of mahogany that is available today is much less suitable for carving this kind of a thing, just exactly because of that, because mahogany has a tendency, one year's growth rings will be in one direction and the other year's growth rings will be in a completely other direction. So the carving is much more difficult than was the case with this particular chair with the wood that Benjamin Bucktrout had to use, because the grain structure of the wood was much tighter, harder, and made it much easier to carve. So it's quite a challenge, because sometimes you have to carve with your chisel running in this direction, and at other times in other spaces maybe only half-inch apart, you have the grain is running in the other direction. So in order to carve it properly, you have to turn the piece completely around.
Fascinating.
And next to it you can see the beginning of the third capital of the third column. You can see how it's just sort of, Michelangelo spoke in sculpture of releasing the object, carving away everything that wasn't the statue that he was trying to carve, and you can sort of see here how Wallace has carved away the background, and there's the rough outline of the Capitol, but the fine detail is just barely coming in this section.
Right, so it's in there
and
waiting
on the
to come
side.
out. He just has to release it, right?
Right, exactly.
Perfectly. So, is it possible to get a little look at the back of the gentleman here? Yes. And this is how he's going to proceed. So, he has until the end of the month then to
something like that. I think
complete the project. Do you have any other stray pieces around that are related to the chair, like this one, for example?
Those aren't those are for another project altogether.
Yeah, the tools over there.
The rest of the reproduction. Did you see the arch?
No, I didn't.
Here's the beginning of the arch.
Record those films forever, Charlie.
I promise I will not send CW the film. It will remain in California, always. Okay, the arch is going where now? I can't remember.
It goes
Now don't let it rattle you, it's okay.
It's on top of the chair altogether on the very... You're looking at the front of it here, but it'll go on top of here.
I see. It's
these pegs. This section will dovetail into the tops of the capitals.
Okay. When you take the chair apart like that, it's hard to kind of
imagine.
recognize some of these pieces unless they were standing right up against each other.
Third, there's a small section. Oh, that's something really special that we'll have to show you that I've forgotten all about. There's a little scroll that fits here, and the bust of Matthew Pryor sits underneath here. And there's another book that lies flat on top of here. When we get back, the next thing I want to show you is right over there.
Okay.
It's something that some of our conservation work is turned up. This is that arch that we just looked at right here.
I see. With the different colors and everything, this chair appears dark brown, and that is such a lovely lighter shade of brown.
We don't really know whether that's a result of the aging of the varnish on the chair, or whether it's more a result of a stain that was applied to the chair. And
now this is definitely gold.
Yes, ma'am. It's gold colored, and if you look very closely, you can see the layers on the edge of that ray of the sun, where there is.
They've touched it up.
What they've done somewhere along the line. This was a carved piece of wood. Then they applied gesso, and then it was water gilded, which requires the application of a layer of clay bowl onto it, which gives it, and you can barely see a red color right in there. That's the bowl, and then on top of that is gold leaf. And then somewhere along the line, the gold leaf must have worn thin, and so they decided to paint it with radiator paint, bronze paint, and you get this dull color on it. The same is true up here in this section, where we have done a little bit of removal of the paint, and you can just barely see the letters underneath the layer of paint. And you really, it looks to us at this point like V, I, and then just barely you can see an R. It's a combination of really being able to see it and wishing to see something.
Are you going to peel it off so you can see more?
But eventually we're going to have some people who have the proper equipment and proper materials to remove that gold paint, that later paint that's on there, so that we can see what is in fact underneath there, what was painted onto the surface of the gilding there earlier.
Okay, I know that a number of you have worked on this chair for over a year, because when we were here a year ago, you had already started it.
Yes, ma'am.
How long do you think it took Benjamin Bucktrout to make the chair by himself?
I would hesitate to say that he did it completely by himself. I'm sure that his entire shop was involved in the process. But I really would hate to say how long he was doing it. He wouldn't have the interruptions that we've had in the process, and he would have had the setup there for doing cabinet work of this quality all the time, whereas this kind of construction work is something that, while we're certainly capable of doing, we have a large amount of other things that keep us involved with the actual conservation work of the antique objects. I would hesitate to say perhaps Wallace would be able to answer that question better than I can.
We know it's impossible to really nail it down. I'm intrigued with all this incredible design work, and it's just amazing.
Would you like to see the gilding in process? I can't show you the actual work, but I can show you some of the materials involved in gilding. And you can see the reproduction of the sun over here.
That's beautiful.
This is.
So you have parts of the chair all over the shop
just
being
about
worked on, and
this is the way the sun will look when it's replaced onto the reproduction chair. And somewhere we have a moon. I'll look just a minute and see if I see the silver moon. And you can see the gilder's equipment here, the brush, the little book of gold leaf, booklet of gold leaf here.
Is that expensive to buy?
The gold leaf itself is not that expensive, because as you can see, it's very, very thin. The gold leaf itself is very, very thin. And while it is 24 karat gold or 23 karat gold, it's so thin that it's
hardly
not
weighs
that
anything.
much gold at all there.
Right.
And I don't know what to do with that.
It's just, it's less than paper thin, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. It certainly is less than paper thin.
It's hard to handle.
The air conditioner, you can see the just the current of air will blow it around.
That's fascinating.
Making a mess. All right, so let's see if I can.
I see your silver leaf here. Your box of silver leaf.
The box of silver leaf, and oh, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Look
wonderful.
at this treasure trove.
Oh goodness! Everything is down in the drawer. Oh, wonderful. So now, would you describe each object for me? So
these are the keys and the quills, and this is at the very lowest section of the reproduction of the chair. The keys are now a dark brown, a very dark, almost black brown. The quill pins have also been painted a golden color, which are no longer quite visible. The silver on the moon is completely worn away, so there's very little evidence that the moon was actually silver.
This is incredible. All these brightly colored objects that are going to be on this chair. It's going to be a really striking chair.
Yes, it is. This is the section where we saw the VIR that's underneath the gold paint on this one. The star, which will go on the book. The ruler, which Jay Gaynor made, as he did a number of these other tools as well, which will go on the...
Let me move around so I can get a better shot of that ruler.
That goes right underneath the bust, I believe. And then the book that will go on the very top section, or the pedestal for whatever went on the very top that's now missing.
Okay, what is the piece that is missing?
We don't really know. As far as I know, nobody really knows what went on the very top.
Oh, so how are you guesstimating that?
Well, I don't know. I have not even heard anybody discuss what they're going to put on the top. So I really don't know what's going to go up there, if anything
still up
at all.
in the air.
It may be that because we have no clue as to what it is, that we're just going to return it to the masons in Edenton without a top section on it, since we don't really know at all what it is.
Well, that was a wonderful tour, and we certainly are grateful. Thank you again. I'd like you to tell everyone what your name was again and exactly what your position is here at Colonial Williamsburg.
My name is Jay Gaynor, and I'm the curator of mechanical arts and responsible for the tools in the collection. And I'm working with Wallace on the project, actually for Wallace on the project, making the reproduction tools that are going on the back of the chair. And right now, I'm shaping down the transition between the trowel handle and the blade of the trowel itself. And if you get a shot of the original one, you can see how this portion, which actually represents an iron ferrule or a brass ferrule going into a wooden handle, comes down and flares out and dies into the top of the blade. And that's what we're trying to do right now.
How many hours of work does it actually take to get it to that point of where you are now?
Well, aside from the turning, which goes fairly quickly, I probably have about 2 hours in this so far, in this particular piece. And by the time it's done, I'll probably have another hour or two in it.
So you have pencil marks there on the end of the blade that you're going to be carving that?
Well, this is the center line of the blade here. And this line is actually the shape of the blade itself, and we're leaving this piece on it to act as a tab or a tenon to go up into the rail of the chair.
Oh, I see.
And
that's
so,
a tab to slip into the chair.
So actually when you see it on the chair, it'll be cut off like that.
Oh.
And then the handle down here will be cut at an angle also to butt up against the side rail of the chair.
I see. Wonderful. Okay, lock him in, jailer. This is a terrible criminal. He's managed to evade justice all these years, and now the jailers got him.
Does this mean that I won't have any Bavarian chocolate cake?
Is that going to be good?
Bavarian chocolate cake? Who are you kidding? You are a base criminal. You have finally come to your reward. Are you repentant?
No.
No?
No, I'll take that chocolate cake a la mode, all right?
Good luck. You'll take nothing, sir. You are here for 5 days. Do you hear me? 5 days.
Oh,
no. No chocolate cake. No restrooms. No beds.
No restrooms.
No,
bed.
sir. What are you going to do about that?
Well, why don't you just bring a TV so I can look at that?
Forget it! Good day, sir.
Good day to you, madam.
And how are you today?
Moderately well, thank you. What is the purpose of that instrument, pray?
This instrument is sketching you for our historic records.
Well, I don't know if I approve of that.
Well, the Reverend Henley was sketched and he found it okay, so we thought that you might go along with us.
Oh, well, Reverend Henley, he's quite a modern thinker, you know. It's going to get him in trouble one of these days.
I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Mistress Sylvia Lehman from out of the colony, and I'm in here visiting, and I was wondering if I could introduce myself to you.
Well, I should be delighted. I'm Joseph Kidd, the upholsterer, at your service.
How nice.
Yes, well, I came here with Governor Bucktrouts, you know, 2 years ago, and agreed to help him set up his household. Of course, now I'm in business for myself, however.
Where is your shop, sir?
Oh, I don't have a shop. It cost a great deal of money to open a shop here. No, I leased from Colonel Washington the old Custis property on the back street, you know. It's quite a large house, and I didn't need all the rooms, so I turned it into a boarding house, and I work out of there.
I see. Are you on an errand today?
Oh, well, yes, I was on my way to his lordship's house at the moment, you know. He passed away, it's been a week ago now, and I made the casket, and I want to get paid.
Oh, I see. That would be a most important errand for you then.
Oh, well, yes, indeed. What colony are you from? You said you're not from this one.
California.
You're from the island of California? Oh, my goodness. Well, it's quite a large island, I'm told.
Yes, I've come a long way to see you and visit the home of my relatives. Perhaps you're acquainted with some of my kinsmen.
Well,
Benjamin Bucktrout?
Mr. Bucktrout? Oh, yes, of course, the cabinet maker.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, yes, indeed. As a matter of fact, I've done some upholstery work for him.
I thought maybe you were acquainted with Mr. Bucktrout.
Are you visiting with him now?
Yes, we're having a wonderful time over on Francis Street in his lovely large home.
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, my goodness, it is quite an honor to meet you.
Well, same to you, sir.
However did you end up in that Spanish colony of California?
Well, the weather is more mild out our way, out west.
Oh. Well, I suppose there's some merit in that. Well, it took me quite a while to season to this climate, I can tell you.
This is such a lovely mild day, very similar to our weather in California.
Oh,
if it were like this every day, I would certainly be a member of your colony.
Oh, well, no, it doesn't stay like this very much in the summer. It's quite hot and humid, you know. Lots of moisture. I told a friend of mine the other day when I was speaking with him, I said, when the good Lord made people to live in the colony of Virginia, he truly should have given them fins instead of noses. well, no, it's so humid here, you know, so much water in the air.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yes, it's quite remarkable.
But that helps your breathing.
Oh, well, it does do that, that's true.
Yes, it gives you...
Well, all sorts of ailments, true, sir.
Do you have a family, sir?
No, not at the moment.
Where is your home, if I may be so bold?
Well, as I said, I leased the old Custis property from Colonel Washington. It's also on Francis Street.
Oh, yes.
Yes, close to where they're going to build the hospital.
I see.
Of course, I'll have to move then, you know.
Uh-huh. Well, I'm so glad that we were able to have this opportunity to meet you, and
Well, it's my pleasure.
Taking your greetings to our kinsmen in California.
Oh, well, yes, and tell them if they need some upholstery work done, that they might call on me. I should like the opportunity to have occasion to go there.
Thank you so much.
Not at all. Well, good day to you.
Good day.
This is what's always been known as in the family as the Redwood Ordinary, or Redwood's tenement. Redwood was the keeper of the jail at one time. It's a small house with twin chimneys, and the restoration, I think, has changed its name now to Booker Tenement, which is a name more suitable to the colonial time that it was built. They have a sign out in front that says it will be restored soon. We don't know what they're going to do with it.
And how is it related to the family?
Well, Aunt Virginia owned this, and this was one of the pieces of property that was left to Lefford Howard, who had quite a time arranging a lease with Colonial Williamsburg.
Okay, and as we pan down the street, we're looking in the direction of the jail, spelled G-A-O-L in colonial days and pronounced jail. And also on the right-hand side of the street would be the very back of the Armistead Sisters lot. 1.
This is called the Brush Everard House today, but this is where grandmother Braithwaite's sister, Virginia Bucktrout Smith, lived. She had married Judge Smith. They raised a large family in this house. They lived here for 40 years, and after them, 2 maiden daughters lived here until they died many years later, cousins Cora and Estelle. The house is original, a colonial house. When they restored it, all they had to do was tear off a front porch that had been tacked on. And the outbuildings are original also. There's a 100-year-old boxwood hedge in the rear.
Right down there. And there is also a darling ship that was etched into the glass upstairs in one of the bedrooms. A tall-masted ship in full sail. I noticed one time when I was up there years and years ago looking out the window. Some child had etched a ship into the window.
I think maybe it was some girl that had a sailor for a sweetheart.
That could be. And then we come down the greenways and we're in the side yard of the Brush Everard house. Bruce, can you point to the ship?
Right up here. On a north window pane of the downstairs middle window is scratched a ship in full sail in the same H.B. Smith 1878 Henry Bruce Smith.
There's the ship.
Old guidebooks mention 1734 scratched on a parlor window pane, or on another window S.B. 1796, O Fatal Day.
That would be upstairs, I believe.
Upstairs, yeah.
So this is the ship in full sail by Henry Bruce Smith. Our little group of bucktrout descendants is clustered here on the sidewalk on kind of a drizzly day, but we're not getting too much drizzle right now. And we're looking at a lovely colorful fall tree, and we're looking east down Francis Street toward the home of our great-great-great-grandfather, Benjamin Bucktrout. Here we are on the corner of Bucktrout Lane, walking up to the sign to inspect the brand new sign that Ann Ballard Cutler had put up. Bucktrout Lane. Walking up to the front door, it might be fair to state that this is also known as the Chiswell Bucktrout House, because a rather notorious man named Chiswell also lived here. But he murdered someone and was arrested, and apparently took his life with his own hand. And then Bucktrout became the owner. We have a little boot scraper here, cast iron, down in the steps.
Next door to the Bucktrout house is an empty site now where the home place was, the Braithwaite home. It extended back and took in the middle plantation hill where the graveyard is. Right across from home place was the Galt house. And Miss Sally Galt was Minnie Braithwaite's godmother. And they were distant relatives and close friends.
So now, who were all the people that lived at home place?
Oh, don't ask me. There was 12 children. And even Alex lived there at one time.
And what style of a house was home place?
Well, they called it Greek Revival, which is what I've always heard. A big white house, and the front porch, the vestibule was paved with marble that Grandfather Braithwaite got over at the Capitol site. which was in ruins. And was
Oh, well, that's interesting. So now, which house over across Francis Street is the Galt house?
the big white house right here.
The big white house.
This is the Galt house across the street from Home Place, across Francis Street. Like many Williamsburg houses, it grew. It's a colonial house, so through the ages it has grown, stretched out from one addition to another addition to another addition to its present form. The little house on the very right is called an office. That was any little building that had no other description or that was a little rental.
Okay, so Minnie's godmother lived in this house, and she gave Minnie her name, which was Minnie Galt Braithwaite, and she named her. Bruce and I are standing here across from Providence Hall, and Aunt Dorothy is walking down the walk, and we're looking out here over her mother's pond, which was always called Minnie's Pond. She dammed up the creek because she wanted to raise watercress and turned it into a pond. We're having a little light raindrops, but that's not going to discourage the Bucktrout descendants, right, Bruce?
Absolutely not.
It's not chilly at all, it's just...
No, it's very comfortable, very comfortable. Actually, this was the rain that was supposed to come a couple of days ago, and we're real fortunate that it let out a little bit.
Looking now at the bridge over Minnie's Pond and up the slope to the truly magnificent Providence Hall, which Virginia Bruce Braithwaite Howitt rescued from demolition at Providence Ford, Virginia, and brought numbered beam by beam all the way here to Williamsburg to her property and had reconstructed. And eventually it was leased to Colonial Williamsburg by the Bucktrout Braithwaite Foundation. Aunt Dorothy, would you like to talk a little bit about the design of the building? And
well, it's a typical colonial style with the dormer windows, which you know are tax loopholes. They didn't count as rooms, they were taxed as attics. And many houses had these double chimneys. This house in particular has huge double chimneys. That meant there were huge fireplaces in the basement and on the main floor and the attic.
okay, and this house is an exact copy of what?
It's exactly like Washington's birthplace and also many other early colonial Virginia houses.
Right. Okay. We're very fortunate in that we were able to come in the front door of Providence Hall, looking around the entryway. And I would like Bruce to read what this plaque says down by the front door.
Providence Hall. This house, built before the Revolution, was saved from demolition and painstakingly relocated from Providence Forge, Virginia, to its present site in 1946 by Virginia B. Howitt, in order that it may be preserved for present and future Americans.
Wonderful. And we have here the little entry desk. We're looking at the Bucktrout Braithwaite Burying Ground plaque. And we're coming over here through the woods to the plaque that was erected by Virginia Howitt. It says, "To the honor of the soldiers of the American Revolution who are buried in this graveyard, their names are unknown, their heroism is immortal. Erected by Virginia B. Howitt, 1953. And just over a few feet from that plaque is the stone of Virginia. Sit and rest a while. Virginia Bruce Braithwaite Howitt. February 17, 1876. June 24, 1956. I loved Virginia. And coming to the head of her stone is a brass marker that has on it the insignia of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And at the base of that is a little sign saying that it was installed by the Bucktrout Funeral Service. Aunt Dorothy, where is the ravine that the children were to play in whenever they came? This is the ravine area that Aunt Virginia specifically stated was to be kept available for Bucktrout descendants to play in when they came to Williamsburg. It's surrounding the Revolutionary Burial Hill. And now we're looking back toward the direction of Providence Hall and the home of Ann Cutler. Aunt Dorothy, could you describe a little some of the different individuals who are probably buried on this hill?
Well, they say that it was the burial ground for the early Middle Plantation, which was the village here before Williamsburg was ever established. And Aunt Virginia always said all straight people were buried here. Prominent people, paupers, insane people, and
pirates.
And especially there were a lot of burials here right after the Civil War.
And we're looking down to the gate where we gain entrance.
This is the colonial capital of Williamsburg on Duke of Gloucester Street at the end, the far end from the college at the other end. And this was built in 1704, and that was the year that our ancestor Francis Ballard served as a burgess. He was the son of Thomas Ballard I. And they had served, the burgesses had met at the college, but while they were waiting for this building to be finished. Earlier burgesses in our family met Jamestown before the capital was moved here. Our Bucktrout Braithwaite Foundation is going to have their meeting this afternoon up on the 3rd floor in what they call the Bucktrout Braithwaite room.
And the Bucktrout Foundation meeting will be on the 3rd floor.
Thank you. All the way up the stairs, inside the Capitol building. And coming into the Foundation meeting room. Francis Sachs, our cousin, and of course Dorothy Ross, and another cousin, Ann Bennett.
Hello, brother.
Hey, hello, Alice. How you doing?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, cousins. I'm Sylvia Lehman from California. How are you? Oh, great. Well, you're getting closer out to the West Coast. Wonderful. I guess we're second cousins.
Got right sore climbing all those steps. You know, we walked right down there to the post office.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
We have secretary is not here. She's in Canada and she's flying high. She took off. All of a sudden got the notion that she'd quit her job and do something different, which was great. But we have lost her temporarily. Bruce, did you say that she
She's officially, she's resigned, essentially, as secretary.
Oh.
And,
All the rest the appropriate time. Would you like to read the minutes?
No. At Rose Street. Like the flower.
Just roses and that. That's right. People want their money.
want me to read the
Yes,
minutes?
please.
Okay, minutes of the Bucktrout Braithwaite Foundation meeting, 1985.
Making tapes for us. Could we have as much as, how's our money?
Well, let me say something here. I'm not exactly sure what the expenses will be. So why don't we wait until next year and see how the movie turned out and see what, I'll keep track of anything, you know, like that, and then I'll make a report. How would that be?
Well, then instead of Margie's motion, instead of saying we're going to pay a figure, should say we're establishing her as a committee and she'll make a report next year of how much it cost or something like that.
Very good. Would you like to make that motion? Would Margie be appointed an overseer of assistance for all this video, historical stuff?
Maybe I could help too if something is needed for artwork or anything that you need, you know, I will be
You
there
can
to
draw
do
the
it.
first cover sheet. You can draw that.
We all have to have a hand in this.
But whatever needs to be done, we'll try to get something for you.
Okay, thank you.
Do I hear a motion?
That's my motion.
I'll second. Oh, she seconded. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? We'll do it. Margie? Thank you.
So you have each other's address there.
Phone numbers.
Good.
Every piece of information Dorothy has sent, I have.
Is there any chance of getting the names and addresses of all the trustees?
Yes, phone numbers.
I wrote to,
Except yours.
I wrote to,
some of your information, but
wrote to
Jenny.
and I asked her to send me a copy. And she apologized when she called me about that. This was in the fall of last year. I wrote, things come up from time to time that I thought people that y'all might be interested in, but she never did send me the addresses. I don't know what, she had some excuse for it. I don't know exactly what.
Well, at one time you used to have to pay a couple bucks to pay for the Xerox cost. But I don't even know if we have an up-to-date list now, do we? We need to get one.
The addresses and
I think
all.
we
I
don't
mean,
have
this
up to
thing,
date
I've forgotten what it was, but something came up. I thought it would be interesting to send to everybody, and I didn't have any way of doing it. And I wrote and asked her to mail it to me, but she didn't do it.
Absolutely.
I can't get any results. I write to these people, and I listen down to my love.
I am a recording person that keeps everything.
Me too, Margie. It's frustrating not to have things.
Okay. Yeah, but what I'm saying is,
If you send it to me, I will have it. Nothing is lost. I have everything in order, in a file, in the right place, at my fingertips.
Dorothy, do you have any more?
No, that's it, thank you.
Thank you very much. You're a great asset to this organization, I'll tell you.
I just have to decide whether to give these papers to Francis or Ed.
You know, Bruce, it would really be exciting if we could actually get a look at Williamsburg from the very, very top.
Well, how do you think we could do that?
I don't know. Is there any kind of passageway up there? I sure would like. Oh my gosh! Look who's
What's
up there.
going on?
Somebody's up there.
Where?
Margie.
Where?
Margie Solberg.
Where?
She's up on the Widow's Walk. Watch out!
My
Don't fall,
goodness,
Margie.
what's going on up there?
Oh, there goes your hat.
Here comes. My goodness.
She's a brave lady. We'll have to
really
go up
is.
there, Bruce. What do you say?
Yeah, okay.
Let's go up there.
Let's definitely go up there. 18th century way of climbing these stairs up into the pinnacle of the Capitol Bell Tower. How are you coming there, so?
Fine.
Just don't watch out for that latch. You
Okay.
can grab a hold of this banister right here. There you go.
Coming
You're
up.
doing great.
Yeah.
Coming up.
There we go, top step,
Okay.
and here we are.
Here we are.
Oh, we have a little tiny window up here.
Right here, you can see right out here.
Ooh, wow.
And you can notice this is a very small little, what is it, octagonal room right here. And right in front of us is the door that leads out to, where do you think it leads out to? Let's open up this door right here.
Okay.
And so, here. My goodness, what do you think this goes out to?
A widow's walk, or
Something
whatever they
like
call
that.
it.
Well, I guess only one door opens, so let's
Oh.
sort of go out.
We have to
Here.
squeeze through.
Pretty much so. Right here. And my goodness, take a look at this.
Oh, Bruce.
This is right at the bottom
It's straight
courtyard.
down.
Straight down. The courtyard right here leading into the Capitol.
You didn't tell me it was straight down, Bruce.
So right in her background is Duke of Gloucester Street leading up to the College of William and Mary. Let me give you a slow panoramic view of all this. What is that that house back there? Is that any recognizable house? Maybe not.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
Familiar. Right here, we're going to give you a slow panoramic view. Right here. And that's Christiana's Campbell's right there in the distance, isn't that?
Right.
Okay. Let me swoop down right here to give you some idea of where we are at the Capitol. And you can see the tops of the roofs and the various gables. And again, this is the courtyard that we showed before. Now, Sylvia, would you like to walk around this walkway?
Walk around and I'll meet you back here.
Okay. We'll just take a little walk around here. And this is just an exquisite view, and of course not very many people are allowed up here. In fact, we're pretty much out of bounds as far as the normal tourist thing. As you see, people down there going into the entranceway, which is like 180 degrees from that entranceway that we had showed you before. You can just see the colors are just magnificent. And again, we're coming around, and here is Duke of Gloucester Street again. Just gorgeous, just gorgeous. Right here. And we're almost finished our 180 degree, and guess who we meet on the other side? There is Sylvia.
Bruce, I think it could be said that we've gone as high as we can go in Williamsburg, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I see a little ledge up there.
Okay, let's see what's up there.
But we're
my
not
goodness.
going up there, Bruce.
No, I don't think so. Not today. Not today. And what is that? Is that like a little...
It's a weather vane.
Just a little weather vane. And let me show you where we came from. You see, this is pretty much of a cat's walk. You can see there, and you can see my shoe right there. You want to say a few words before we get arrested?
I think it would be marvelous to end our trip to Colonial Williamsburg right here, at the very, very top, at the pinnacle of power in Colonial Williamsburg.
Absolutely. Well, why don't you take my picture, Sylvie?
Okay.
I'll just hand you the camera. Yes.
This is Bruce. Oh, magnificent profile, patrician profile, etched over the top of the Duke of Gloucester Street, home of our ancestors, never to be forgotten.